Hi there, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is Gretchen Jordan, the Alive Association Manager, and I'll be your host today. You should all be automatically muted, and I will tell you that this session is being recorded, so you'll be given a link to be able to review this later as well. If you would do me a favor, and if you could please post in the chat box that you can hear me, and then I know I'm not talking to myself. Great. I see that somebody can hear me. That's good. And I'm going to ask that today we exclusively use the chat box for questions, comments, and answers. You can do that just to the organizers or just to the presenters, but you should be able to hear me. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. Just got a little bit of housekeeping, and as we go, if you want to introduce yourself, please introduce yourself in the chat box. I've put an example up there: name, location, and organization. All right, hold on here just a minute. All right. Checking here, can everyone? Let's make sure that everybody can hear me. My systems are saying that you should be able to hear me. I'm not seeing from any of the attendees that they can hear me. Let's see, and lots of people are having questions here. Let me just check that. Okay, people can hear me. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started then. So thank you all for being here today, and welcome. Our webinar today is a recap of the National Conference on Volunteering Service and the MAVA Conference, and some national conversations about the sector, some updates from folks who know. I'd like to just briefly go over our agenda. We're going to have a few quick poll questions so that we know a little bit more about who is on the call. And I'll briefly introduce our panel now, and then they'll have their presentations and thoughts about the conferences and the national updates. Plenty of time for questions at the end. But if you do have questions, please do type your message into the chat box, not into the question box, because everyone can see the question and the answer that way. So our presenters today, and I'll describe them in order. First will be Garrett Zafke. He was the MAVA conference chair. Jason Frenzel, who is the Alive Board President, and he's going to talk about NCVS. And then we have Betsy McFarland, who is our Alliance Facilitator. She'll be talking about the national updates. And off to the right, our moderator today was to be Michelle Raymer, and she is from Iowa. And if you heard on the news last week, there were some tornadoes there. So in her work, she is working on some active disaster response today, and that's kind of our life, and I know you all understand. But I'd like to really thank Michelle for all of her work to get this webinar set up, and really glad that you could all be on here today. Again, as I said, we'll be recording this call. I've also got the slides, which I'll be distributing as a handout later, and we'll go ahead and now and jump in with those polls. So you should see the polls pop up onto your screen here in just a moment. So just to get a little bit better idea of where you're from. You'll see this on your screen, and I'll be able to tell how long people are voting, and I won't keep them open too long to move this quickly. I'll kind of show the results, and then we'll move on to the next poll question. But that kind of gives everybody a good idea of, where everybody's coming from. So we're going to close the poll. We're going to share the results. And you could see, a pretty nice split between Eastern and Central. Our friends in Mountain Time Zone, we'll miss them, but again, we'll have this recording available for our Alive members. So on to the next poll question. And wondering, and you can pick any of these which apply, wondering which conference you might have attended, the MAVA, NCVS, or neither. And my guess is that many of you attended neither, because that's why you're here today, because you want to know what happened or what's going on. So that's great. That's exactly why we did it. So we'll close the poll and we'll share the results. And this is about what we expected. So that's great. Means we're providing content that is welcome and relevant for our members. So just to learn a little bit more about what types of volunteer engagement conferences you usually attend. And again, you could choose all that apply. International, national, regional, state, or local. So go ahead and let's get your votes there and we can kind of see. And speaking from experience myself and over 25 years of managing programs, there's so much that it has to do with the timing, the location, the budget, and the support of your director and or your peers. So great, good voting. Thank you very much. We'll share those results. And most people, it looks like, attend those regional or state conferences, national and local. It would be pretty awesome to go to Australia for a conference, I must say, but someday we'll just say that. And then we've got one more poll question for you, and that is going to be helpful for Betsy as she goes into her section in a little bit. But just wondering if you've heard about the National Alliance. So I'll let you all vote there. And again, that's another great reason why you're here today. If you haven't, it's okay. This is one of the ways we'll let you know about it. So I will close the poll. I'll share the results. So kind of half and half. So that's great. And Betsy will be here with the latest updates. And again, there'll be plenty of time for questions. So I will go ahead and close this poll. And we will go ahead and go with our first speaker, who is Garrett. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor. We received, and we, meaning Alive, received a grant this year from Verified Volunteers, and that sponsorship helped expand our online webinars for you, for our members and our colleagues. So just a brief thank you to Verified Volunteers. And we did our poll questions, and Garrett, I will let you take it away. Don't forget to unmute yourself if you haven't already, but go right ahead.
Sounds good. I'm already here. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Garrett Zafke. I work for Dakota County. Just to give you a quick highlight of that, we are the third largest county in Minnesota. We are just south of Hennepin and Ramsey, which is where you will find Minneapolis and St. Paul. So we're very close to the metro. We're a part of it. And it's been fun to work in this area. A lot of good volunteers and a lot of good capacity for that. So really fast, just so you guys know what MAVA stands for. It stands for Minnesota Association for Volunteer Administration. We have a conference. It historically has been every other year, but last year we decided to have this conference every year. So following this conference, we're going to make sure that we have our state conference every single year coming forth with that. For this year, so this is kind of our first year of doing it with that, so we kind of caught some people off guard. So our numbers are a little bit lower than what we experienced, but we had about 250 attendees for the conference this year. We had it at Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota. So it was a nice location. Everything was really close, especially if people were flying in, really close to the airport, really close to a lot of travel areas. So it worked out really well for us. We had it in early June, which most people thought worked pretty well. We try to beat the summer rush. As Minnesotans, we like to experience our summer and we like to pack it full of stuff. So we wanted to make sure that we got it early in the calendar so that way people could come to the conference, learn some stuff, and then hopefully utilize that in the field for the upcoming summer season. We had about 40 breakout sessions offered, and those sessions ranged into 3 different categories, and that was professional development, best practices, and current trends. So depending on what someone wanted to do, they could either follow one of those tracks or they could pick and choose from each of those tracks to create their schedule. We had attendees come over from a dozen different states from around the United States and 4 different countries. So it was a neat grasp. We do say that we are a regional conference. We try to serve Minnesota, but we do realize that there is a need and desire for these conferences. So we're not surprised that we do see quite a large influx from other areas besides just Minnesota and the Midwest. So it's nice because we kind of have a way to see what else is going on and get good ideas from maybe not our region. And so it's nice to have that just to kind of further increase our research and make our conversations that much more richer when we're talking about that. All right, if you want to go to the next slide here. Perfect. So we sent out a survey at the end of our conference just to figure out, did we serve people well? Something just to highlight is most of our attendees enjoy the conference, and they stated they were better prepared for their jobs because of their attendance. And that's always nice to see. We want to make sure that the information that we're sharing is relevant and that it's actually helping. I don't know about you, but I've been to conferences sometimes where I walk away and it's like, what did I learn? I'm not really sure. And we don't want to have that. We want to make sure that everyone is gaining something from that. Sometimes it's networking, sometimes it's professional development, sometimes it's just a couple new ideas to take and use in your organization. But we're hoping that for the most part, some people are taking away something from that conference. A unique thing this year was that we saw more new people than past attendees. And it wasn't much, it was 51.5% to 48.5%. But even still seeing that, it is interesting to see. Usually our conferences, we have people who've been with one of our conferences before. So it was neat to see that we kind of have switched that a little bit where we're gaining more momentum from new people. Really neat for us to see that just because it shows that the field is either growing or people are moving out. So we're just trying to make sure that we are serving the people that are coming to this conference well. And go ahead and just go to the next slide for us. So let's talk a little bit about the breakout sessions. That's kind of the meat of our conference, and that's kind of where people are going to be learning most of what they are going to see when they come to our conference. Yeah. So the majority of our attendees rated our sessions either a 4 or a 5, which is pretty good. I know that our selection committee really tried to vet as many people as possible. One thing that was a little difficult for us this year is that, so our theme this year for our conference was next steps and beyond. And as a planning committee, we really thought it was important to allow people who maybe their next step was to speak or to teach. And so we really invited some new people to come and speak for us. For the most part, it was successful. There were some that definitely maybe were not ready to speak or to teach, but we really wanted to open that door for a lot of people and get a chance to, stretch themselves a little bit more in that. And so most of our sessions were rated 4 or 5. We did have a couple lower ones in that, and kind of looking at that, a lot of it was just for people who are not used to that. And so we're going to work a little bit better next year just to vet our speakers in that. But we really do want to keep it open for people who this may not be a professional gig for them. This may be that they have really good information and we want them to share that with us. The sessions, some of our favorite session topics and themes included time and productivity management, building a volunteer culture, social media, top trends. And this is pretty relevant for just everyday usage with volunteer organizations. And so it's not surprising that these are the top trends in that, especially with social media, as it's just becoming more and more relevant in people's lives. People are trying to figure out how to really use that as a useful tool to their organization. It can be kind of a time pit and suck up a lot of your time and may not get good results. So that's been a big one that we've been seeing, is trying to figure out what's the ROI with social media and what are the best avenues and platforms to take that. Next slide, please. And I kind of already highlighted on this, we did notice some more negative feedback than other years about our sessions. Some of that was just not engaging, little energy from the speaker, not enough group time, more advanced trainings needed. And that's always good to see. It just allows us to then kind of tailor our conference to serve those who are coming. What is hard though is that usually our conference is what we would call a mixed bag, where we have people who are completely new to the field, sharing the same space as someone who's been in the field for 20 years. And so it's kind of hard to find sometimes topics that would relate to both, especially with people who are completely new to the field. They don't know the lingo, they don't know the structures, and so we almost have to kind of teach them that during this conference. Whereas if you've been doing this for 20 years, you already know all that, and so you want to find ways to stretch yourself. And so we're always trying to reinvent new ways to explain information or to get certain tailored sessions for certain types of people. One thing that we noticed too was that there seemed to be too many options. I like options, I always like to give the choice of options, but we realized that with some of our really dynamic speakers, if you can't make it to their one session, it's kind of a bummer that you missed out. So we're looking at adding multiple sessions in our conferences moving forward, where if you can't schedule the first one, you might have a chance to schedule it down the line with your list. We also thought that presenters need to present the same session, make it more just accountable for people so that they can get into that. Also, we found out that more seasoned presenters wanted, and like I said, that's probably just because we did bring in some people who it was new to the field for them to present. And we get that. We get that time is valuable and that we want to give everyone as much information in a way that they can utilize it. And so sometimes if you're new to speaking, you're not able to digest that information as well. So we did see that seasoned presenters were wanted with that, which is good for us to see. It shows that people are hungry for more knowledge. And what do we share? Because we only have a couple days to do this conference and we only have so many speakers that we can highlight. So it really becomes an issue of how can we get that information out in a way that people are able to utilize that and then bring it back to our organization. Because once again, we want our conferences to really matter and to make a difference in your professional life. All right, next slide, please. So just some things coming forward. For the most part, like I said, things were really great. We saw a lot of positive feedback from those who attended our conference. A lot of people seem to have a really good time. Something just to note though, we did see that a lot of people seem to forget that we are a Minnesota-based organization. It's right in our title. We are, a Minnesota association. And I think that's great. I think for us, it shows that we're doing something right here in Minnesota with the organization, and we are being really supportive with our groups. I know for myself, I kind of don't see that blessing at times, and I take that for granted. And so I know that other states don't have the same organization, and so we love to share that with everyone around us and as many people as we can. But I know that one of the things that we saw a lot was actually, can we move the conference outside of Minnesota, maybe more to the East Coast or West Coast? And so it's kind of a funny thing for us because we do want to keep that in Minnesota for that reason. But it does show the need for a national presence and more of that emphasis on that, and there is a demand and desire for that. And so I think that's good to see. I think that's good to see that people are becoming more aware of these issues and wanting that professional development. So I think it's really cool that we do reach out to quite a bit of different people in different cities and states and regions, and I think that's great. But it does show that we do need a need for a national presence. And with anything else, we can't make everyone happy. We do our best to do that, but sometimes we just, can't meet them there with where they're at. And as a conference, we are a smaller conference, and we're going to continue to grow and get better at what we do. This was my first year as chair, so I've learned some really good things for next year. So we're looking to only positive things for everything in the future. And most of what we said, most of the negative details that we saw were just personal preferences or assumptions, which honestly, you can't really beat those. We work with volunteers. We completely understand that. Our volunteers bring in personal preferences and assumptions all the time into our programs, into our organization. And all we can do is educate and teach them. And hopefully those will get better as time goes on. And once again, we've kind of already exhausted the speaker selection with that. Like I said, in a nutshell, our conference was really successful. Everyone that came had a really good time, really good networking opportunities, and some really good dynamic speaking. I know I learned some really interesting things this year to bring back to my organization. So all in all, it was a really successful conference for us.
Yes, it's part of, it's literally.
Thank you, Garrett, very much. And because everyone will have a little bit of time to present, but while it's still fresh in your mind, if anyone has questions for Garrett, if you would like to put it in the question box, and I'm understanding through monitoring the chat and the question box, it looks like only the presenters can see the chat box and only the attendees can see the question box. So I'm going to kind of interpret for both. So I'm just going to be looking at the question box here for a moment. if anybody's got questions for Garrett, I'm going to give you just a few moments. Otherwise, we'll move into Jason's presentation. Garrett, thanks. And I'll ask just briefly, while I'm waiting to see if anybody else has a question. Oh, Joy would like to know, is there a date for the MAVA conference in 2019?
Okay, bye.
Right now, we don't have a firmed up date yet. We are looking to probably have it around the same time, kind of the early summer mark. We haven't been able to kind of hit down a date just yet, though, with Hamlin. So we're working on it right now. We'll get that out pretty soon, actually. We're meeting as a conference here, going to be late summer. So we're hoping by either late summer or early fall that we'll have that date out.
Thank you very much. And a date, and Joy says, thank you very much. So Garrett, I'm wondering if there were, you talked a little bit about, what were the most interesting, but what always excites you the most after attending a conference? And did you get a feel for what people were most excited about and, some common themes that they might take with them back to their daily work?
Yeah, I think for me, I always enjoy these conferences. I'm able to meet people just either in my state or in surrounding areas and kind of find the people who are doing the same thing or similar to me, and just kind of talking about structure base and just organizational base and how are they doing their everyday jobs. It is really neat to kind of see what they're doing, because sometimes they're doing their job in a way that I would have never thought to do it in. And so I think it's just a great way to kind of look at my typical picture from a different viewpoint. And that way I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm able to kind of look and see what has been successful for them, what hasn't been, and how I can maybe integrate that into my everyday work life.
Thank you. So I have a question here also, and Marianne, I see your question. I'm going to come back to that one in just a moment. And Lori says that networking and brainstorming ideas are what I look most forward to. Absolutely. Networking is just priceless at those face-to-face conferences for sure. And Marianne has a question, and I'm not sure if you can answer it, Garrett. Jason may have a little bit more of a picture, but I'll put it out there as, and some of you may know this, is that the Points of Light for the NCVS conference next year also announced it would be in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So Marianne's question is, will the MAVA conference be combined with the Points of Light conference since they are both in Minneapolis? And, Garrett, I don't know if you know the answer to that. If you want to lob that one to Jason, I think that's okay.
I actually do. So I do sit on the MAVA board, and we just had a meeting about it last week. And it's not in stone just yet, so don't quote me on it, but what we are working with Points of Light, we're hoping that we can partner with them to kind of integrate our conference together with Points of Light. It may not be the exact same dates. It might be, a couple days before. We're kind of working on those fine details to hash it out, but what it looks like is that we'll probably be partnering with Points of Light for next year. And just a correction, it will be actually in St. Paul and not Minneapolis next year. But yeah, so we're hoping that partnership will work out for us.
Okay. I've got a few more quick questions, and then we'll move on to Jason's presentation. And thank you, everybody, for the questions. Angela wants to know, you said the conference focused on best practices, current trends, and what was that third area?
That third area was professional development.
Professional development. Thank you. And then Jennifer wants to know how many different types of organizations attended.
Oh, good question. Let me see here. So I know that some of our attendees were from the same organization, and I'm just shooting this off the top of my head from what I've seen with numbers, but I'd say that we had easily around about 200 organizations, and that's not including the speakers. If you include the speakers, we were probably close to kind of about the mid 200s for organizations present at this conference. So it's a nice mix. I mean, we have people from nonprofit, we have people from government, we have faith-based organizations. So it is really neat to kind of have everyone come together, and everyone kind of does their job a little bit differently, but there are similarities across the board. And so it's just kind of nice to see that, and how how similar places do it, and as well as how do completely different organizations do it, because sometimes you can find those similarities that really kind of help work, especially with volunteers. It really can help out bridge some of those gaps that you might have.
Great. Thank you, Garrett, very much for your insight. And I know that you did an amazing amount of work and effort to help put that conference together. So well done. I'll go ahead and go on to our next presenter now, to Jason. And he's going to talk about the National Conference on Volunteering and Service. Go ahead, Jason.
Thanks, Gretchen. So walking into the National Conference on Volunteerism and Service, a lot of us were excited with bated breath to see how things were going to go. As many of you may or may not know, NCVS, Points of Light went through a pretty significant leadership change over the last year. And with Natalie Picken coming on, nobody really knew where their strategic direction was going to be after the last conference just over a year ago, and including talking to their staff. It was the conference this year for many of us working at the national level was very much a bridge building opportunity, lots of face time between lots of different individuals, trying to reestablish strong relationships with a significant amount of staffing changes on their part. I'm really, really happy about the things that I heard and saw from their staff, especially meetings and conversations and presentations from Meg Maloney and Jenny Lawson, who play into a lot of our work as related to the industry of volunteer management. I attended a pre-conference the evening before that was on related to the Service Enterprise Initiative. It was for folks, anybody inside that network or outside the network, nationally and globally. The presenters brought forward basically their strategic plan is that Points of Light will continue, which I'm really excited to hear, continue to focus on capacity building, strengthening organizations like nonprofits, corporations, as well as networks of volunteers. So basically what we heard was that they were effectively, reading between the lines, was that they're doubling down on their Service Enterprise Initiative and their hubs, which was definitely under question in the last year. So really, really excited that they're super interested in continuing to support all of us at the local level or at the regional level through those networks. I know that they have been releasing new methodology for their service enterprise over the last couple of years. Those of you who are not familiar, service enterprise is a process where an organization or community has a certification group that certifies local nonprofits in really highly successful volunteer management practices. That central group is called the Hub, and the Hub does a certification. And a nonprofit would go through a many month process with the Hub to do a self-evaluation, identify weaknesses in their programming that relate to volunteer engagement. And if you think about it holistically, evaluating an organization through volunteer engagement actually is an evaluation of the entire organization, because you need to be developing successful programs that are transparent and allow input from the community, and your financial matters need to be very successful. All of those interact with volunteer management. So it's effectively an evaluation of the organization. I was really excited to learn recently that they have been adding an online version of the delivery mechanism. From where I'm from, Ann Arbor, Michigan, outside of Detroit, we're not a big enough community to have a hub. And they're also experimenting upcoming with certifying municipalities in addition to just nonprofits. So that's really great for those of you who work for governmental agencies delivering volunteer programming. They went on to talk about the areas of engagement, civic engagement that they are and are not working on. So they're focusing on sort of the middle tiers of engagement, the individuals who are affecting a lot of change. We call, the change makers out in our communities that are highly effective, supporting them directly, supporting the nonprofits directly through the service enterprise. Obviously, they're going to continue their strength in working with corporate volunteerism programs, and then working to support networks of volunteering or communities of volunteering, again, sort of through the a la the service enterprise, but also AmeriCorps and other things. They went on to say the things that they will continue to not work on, which I think that these are great, are those individuals who are not yet engaged, the people who are not volunteering. That's probably best left to those of us that are on the hyper grassroots local level, is to try to get those people in the door. Points of Light will also continue to not directly support singular volunteers or volunteering. They feel like their support of the nonprofit agencies is a better use of their time. And again, I tend to agree that with that. And then they have this forward-looking concept called swarms, or these sort of self-actualized communities of volunteering. If we start to think pie in the sky, where civic engagement drastically shifts in our country, that looks like a very different thing than what we're seeing right now. So they're looking forward to their 5-year plan to potentially supporting these swarms, they're calling them, which would be an amazing thing if we're all successful in these matters over the next handful of years and really see a drastic change in volunteerism nationally. The sky's the limit at that point. So those are all really, really good things that I thought were really beneficial, really healthy for the organization. I was very, very happy and relieved to hear that from many different voices throughout the organization. And when an organization goes through change, you just never know how you're going to come out of it. So that all bodes really well for their support of all of us. The conference itself was a traditional 2.5-day conference with 150 or so tracks. 150 sessions. I have not seen official numbers. I was estimating somewhere around 2,500 attendees, just by looking at some of the larger rooms full of people, the opening and closing plenaries, for example, which is notably down from the years ago. But I think that our poll that we had at the beginning of this webinar showcases that not everybody makes it to national conference. Not all of us can afford to do so, and it's really time consuming. So I'll definitely agree with Garrett on we need more state or regional and local conferences and support mechanisms, and probably have a plug at the end of this webinar about a live hybrid conference, which seeks to do that also. But the tracks tend to shift year after year. There were quite a handful again this year, which I always find daunting to decide which to go to. But let me read through them really briefly for you, and apologize that I didn't get this together, that it can't be on your screen right now. Maybe I'll get that, see if I can get that to Gretchen to see if she can post it in the chat box to everybody. I don't know. We'll see if that works. Anyway, the tracks were building resilient communities, business, disaster preparedness, faith, global, higher education, military and veterans, national service, nonprofit capacity building, nonprofit volunteer engagement, tech and volunteerism, and youth engagement. All of those make a lot of sense. It's funny to me that they continue to change year after year, but those are all really good. We have historically, or at least in recent years, also had a track on advanced volunteer engagement or volunteer management that fell through the cracks a little bit because of the staffing change. There was some confusion, and that was those of us that were on that planning team in years past were promised that, that we would be re-engaged again in the near future to help make sure that that level of presentation and education happens at the conference, which I think is very valuable. The picture you have on your screen now was Alive's reception, which was very nice. Lovely evening. There was just over 50 or 60 people there. People from all sorts of areas of the country, all sorts of sectors. Bunch of our members, which was amazing, and Better Impact members who co-hosted it with us. But it was also really sweet. And the Points of Light folks messaged everybody in the conference who have the app on their phone about our reception, and so we got probably 20 people that had never heard of Better Impact or Alive. So that was really nice. I got to give a shout out to Megan Dixie, who's our marketing person, for coordinating that opportunity, both the event and the message out. But that was a really nice boon for all of us to have more interconnectivity. As was brought up, the next National Conference on Volunteerism and Service in November is going to be in Minnesota. Obviously, Garrett can take questions about that more than I can. I've heard some of the things at the national level, but it will be, or at least the announcement was, that it will be June 18 through June 20 of 2019. And because of that, and related to what Garrett and I were talking about, we're looking at wondering and trying to figure out where the second national summit is going to be. That's been an ongoing conversation for the last year. We have, as you may know, the National Summit on Volunteer Engagement was directly pinned with the MAVA conference in 2017. That was very successful, brought together both local thought leaders, emerging leaders, but also lots of national leaders. And so we're looking for a place where we can put the second one to have a bookmark for the next stage of growth, which is obviously going to be really intertwined with the Alliance, which Betsy is going to present about next. But the summit will potentially be its own independent thing. At first, we had discussed likely not having it in Minnesota again, so that it feels like a rotating national conference. But with Points of Light and NCVS moving into the Twin Cities again, and MAVA maybe hopefully being highly involved in that, that might be the way we're going. So we're still in a lot of discussion with a lot of national leaders about where the second summit's going to go, along with the updates from the Alliance that Betsy will give you in a second. Yeah, those were my updates. Anybody have any questions for me quickly?
Thank you, Jason. Sorry we couldn't be there, and it is always a challenge when you have only so many professional development dollars. Which one do you go to? And that there's always great value in that. Being able to see those different perspectives and that bigger picture. I always remember coming away from any national or regional conference and saying, just being very inspired and not feeling alone, like that I was doing that. Was there anything that really surprised you about NCVS this year?
Surprise. Well, I think a lot of people know that the track opening was canceled. We were very excited to hear actually from MAVA's executive director and some of their research. That track opening was canceled. Again, I think a lot of it was the staff capacity issue. So I was both surprised at what they were not able to pull off and were able to pull off with the amount of staffing changes that they had. And so I was really holding my breath that everything would go really well. I think bringing it home to Atlanta was a very wise decision on their part, so that they could coordinate a successful event while going through some of those changes. Yeah, that's probably the biggest one for me.
Okay, thank you. And we did have a comment, a question from Angela, and she wanted to know, and this happens all the time when we start slinging around those acronyms, NCVS and POL. And just to clarify, Point of Light is the organization that puts on the National Conference for Volunteering and Service, which we usually say NCVS. And that is often something that people have a little bit of struggling getting their head around, just who are all these, national players out there. Any other questions for Jason before we move on to the next presentation?
Cool. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Jason. I don't see anyone, so Betsy, I'm going to let you take it away.
Great. Thank you, Gretchen. So, hi, everyone. I am Betsy McFarland, and I have a long history in the volunteer engagement, and recently, in the last 2 years, started doing a lot of consulting work for this field and many others, and have been really fortunate to be part of this initiative to launch a national alliance for volunteer engagement. So, just my quick history on where we got to where we are now, and then I can kind of explain where we're heading. As Jason mentioned, last year in 2017, this time last year, July, the MAVA conference kind of went national for a year to host the National Summit for Volunteer Engagement Leadership. And the idea of last year's gathering was to really take a higher step look at what the field needs, what is needed to really ensure that volunteer engagement is appreciated, embraced, and championed inside all the organizations where volunteers are doing their work, and how do we, as leaders of volunteers, help to push things to that next level. At the summit, there was a lot of session work around developing in different areas, whether it was research, education, or communication, or other areas. What would help to kind of take volunteer engagement up a notch in the United States and beyond? And out of that, we did lots of group work. We actually did live polling at the session that had like 500 people there. It was fabulous. And out of that grew clearly the need for a conversation around volunteer engagement on a national scale outside of individual practitioners of volunteer leadership. We wanted to, and this is where the Alliance was born. And actually, I think you can go to the next slide, Gretchen, if you don't mind, because that might help us to walk through how we went about this. So the mission of this alliance that we are building currently is really to guide, as it says here, future collective action at the national level towards embracing volunteer engagement as an effective strategy to address community needs. So in order to do that, we really can't just talk to ourselves, is one of the key takeaways I think we all had at last year's summit, that we need to really expand our networks, expand our table, and ensure that volunteer engagement is being considered as professional and critical to organizational development as things like fundraising, human resources, right? And that's, as I'm sure all of you on this call knows, how challenging that can be to keep volunteer engagement really at that higher level. And while there's all these efforts like Alive and others to support all the folks who are leading volunteers on the local levels, there's kind of missing this bigger conversation. So you can go to the next slide. And so what we decided to do at the summit, there was a task force that was created. There was about 25 active participants of this task force who raised their hand at the closing meeting of the National Summit last year, who volunteered to be part of helping over a several month process. It turned out to take almost a year. It's a lot of work doing this type of alliance engagement, but to help create what would be the structure and what is needed in order to have this higher level conversation and really drive volunteer engagement as a strategy across all organizations and types. And so the team has spent many, many months thinking through and debating and really stretching the limits of what's possible. And out of it, we have developed a structure which we'll show you in just a moment for what this alliance could look like and how we move something of this nature forward. But the strategy behind this is to pull in all these different voices from across different sectors, including, traditional nonprofits, as you see here, faith-based organizations, health, human services, government, all these that you see, that how do we pull all these leaders together to have this conversation around an issue we all care about, but there are folks who don't always talk to one another. You can go to the next slide. And so as the task force started developing this work, it was really critical, as I mentioned, not to have the same voices always represented. And so we really want to make sure we're pulling in those folks who are doing fundraising and development, human resource professionals, funders, for example. For those of you who were at the summit last year, you know that there was a lot of conversation around that. Jane Justice and Fidelity and all these different organizations came together who are funding these types of issues to start having conversations around, as funders, how are they even supporting and furthering volunteer engagement in the organizations that they are partnered with to help support them. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity here, and you can go to the next slide, for us to be able to kind of really expand our table and have more voices around this table. And our goals with this alliance there's really, coming out of the creation of this alliance, there's 4 key focus areas that were identified during that post-meeting of the National Summit last year. And that's creating a clear national vision around volunteer engagement, developing a communications hub, some sort of mechanism to better ensure that all the folks that I've been mentioning and these important audiences we need to be connecting with, how are we able to drive our conversations and expand that group? Perhaps convening an annual gathering, whether that's in conjunction with other efforts, Jason and Garrett were talking about, like MAVA or the Points of Light events, or if it's its own event. We know there's a strong desire on everyone's part to be able to get together more regularly, but also so it's not, again, just volunteer leaders, but others who have a stake in volunteer engagement. And lastly, furthering research and accreditation to continue basically professionalizing and building upon the base of research that we have available to us today. You can go ahead to the next slide. And so I think this next slide that's coming up is the structure. Yes, it is. Okay, good. I remembered my slide. That's always good. So you can see here, and then I'll kind of talk about Alive's role, but the alliance is, the idea behind the alliance to have a core leadership team of somewhere between 8 to 12 individuals, again, representing all of those different voices that I mentioned previously, to help drive this convening of a national conversation. And within that would be some working groups that would be able to dive deeper into those core 4 focus areas that I described, and to perhaps have some advisors, people who may not be able to participate in a heavy way, but who bring such a wealth, or who might have an interest, for example, executives from other large organizations or key funders of programs, and how do we engage them in this conversation where they can be a part of and give advice to this group as we move forward. And Alive has generously stepped up to be our support and our fiscal agent for the alliance, meaning that they will be, like what Gretchen's doing now with hosting this webinar, providing some administrative support, being a champion. And actually Dana Litwin, who is a part of Alive, she is co-facilitating this effort with me for the alliance. So I want to stress, because a lot of folks have asked, that the National Alliance for Volunteer Engagement isn't a replacement for Alive. As you've probably gathered in what I've already shared, that the goal of the Alliance is to have a kind of a bigger picture conversation engaging many different sectors and voices around the issue of volunteer engagement, whereas Alive's kind of main mission is to be supportive of those who are leading volunteers directly in their own organization and ensure that they have the professional development and networking and all the amazing things that Alive provides for them. So as you can see, the way this is laid out is that this is not a replacement for Alive, or in fact any other local association or other national efforts. It's simply an opportunity to be able to kind of really fine-tune, be strategic, and engage a higher level conversation. And we don't know, perhaps the alliance will stay around for 10, 100 years, or maybe it will only be a few years effort and we'll have elevated the conversation and it will become unnecessary. But at this point in time, it has become very clear to everyone involved that the time is now and the need is great. And so we are really excited about pulling this together, and we're very happy that Alive has been part of it. You can go to the next slide. And so with the next steps of this alliance, we are in the process now of transitioning from the task force who kind of created the structure, created the goals, kind of put some kind of guardrails to this effort. We're transitioning into an interim leadership team. We already have a few folks identified, and we're working on positioning a few more so that by the end, hopefully of July, early August, I know that's coming very quickly, we will have this interim leadership team that will take on this effort through the end of the year to start, with the idea being in January, it will be turned over to an official, more formalized leadership team of the Alliance. We felt we needed this interim step in order to get the right people around the table and ensure we had time to kind of bubble this up and make it last. So that is in the works now, and you will be hearing, and you can see I've included the web address for the Alliance. It's allianceforengagement.org, and we will be listing very soon there on the website who is involved in the leadership team, in case you'd like to know. And that team will also be developing the process to get others engaged. Right now, if you go to that website, which I really encourage you to do, and you sign up, you fill out our contact form and ask to be kept apprised of what's happening, that group will be responsible for then responding and putting out to the groups how to actually, say you have an interest in it, maybe being part of one of the working groups or even being part of the permanent leadership team, or at least the formalized leadership team. It will have diversity and change over time, that they will develop the process for how to do that and how folks like you can get better involved with this effort, because we certainly want a lot of people engaged and excited and being participatory in this effort. So that's one piece of it. And another piece is there is a communications hub working group that's been already meeting, and we're getting closer and closer to launching a new online platform where we can really all gather and exchange ideas, share information, and communicate in a more holistic way. So that's in the works, and we'll be sharing information on the website, hopefully in the next month or two on that. The Clear National Vision Working Group, they're meeting this Thursday. You can see here, Gretchen has included the web address to get in touch with her if you'd like to be engaged with thinking about this from the big picture point of view, as well as the Research and Accreditation Working Group, just to kind of start to learn more about what's involved, how to get engaged, and more information will certainly be forthcoming as things are formalized over the next few weeks. So the next summit, again, as Jason was talking about, there's discussions underway about how best to support this effort, and we'll be sharing more information in the coming months. So we hope that you will check us out, read the case statement that's on the website. It really goes into this in a lot more depth. And please sign up to at least get the updates on the Alliance. We will be sending out regular communications and ultimately in this summer, letting folks know how you yourself can get more engaged in this effort. So thank you very much. And Gretchen, I'm happy to take any questions that folks may have.
Thank you, Betsy. That's wonderful. And I would like to say to folks, if you're interested in these two working groups with the National Vision or the Research and Accreditation, this is not going to be the end-all be-all meeting. This is just the beginning. So if you cannot make the time, at least contact me, sign up. That will get you on, that first mailing list so we can keep everybody informed. I'm certainly not expecting that everybody can make every meeting every time, but we'll start at that point. But to really go to the Alliance and get updates regularly is your best bet. So please do check that out. So are there questions that people have from the Alliance? And Betsy, I'll just ask you quickly, in terms of, I know you were able to go to both conferences, and I'm just wondering, what do you think, what kind of topics or themes did you see that people were the most interested in or felt had the most value to them professionally?
Well, actually, one thing, I'm really glad you asked me that question. And I'm going to answer it, but not directly, in the sense of, I think actually what you raised for me that I do want to share is what I found so interesting is that in my conversations with Allison Dorfler at Points of Light, she's very interested, as is all of Points of Light, in what's happening with the Alliance. They've been watching in it, and they would love to help and be engaged with it, recognizing that, there have been some, challenging history, or, there's different approaches in the field, and everyone's trying to come together and see how we can all move forward in a really collaborative way. And I think what was striking, Jason and I were able to sit in on that pre-meeting, as he mentioned, and so much of where, with the changes to Points of Light, it was really encouraging and really exciting, actually, to see that with their changes, that they are, without us all talking to one another, they had kind of come to some similar areas of need and future next steps as the Alliance. So it seems like a perfect time, almost where all these different stars are aligning for this work, where we have an opportunity now to harness that power and come together in a bigger way. So I found that to be really encouraging, and we'll see where it goes. We'll continue to shepherd that.
Thank you. We have a question from Angela, and maybe, Jason, this is a good place for you to jump in here. How can we promote to our local associations, and what can we share now?
So make sure that you get make sure you sign up for the Alliance newsletter or updates, because that's a good thing to forward on and along. I would also say one of the things that we pass along to our local associations is information from national service. They do some emails that go out about advocacy at the national level, or writing emails to your congressman. Those are really good. And then, people or organizations like Alive, keep on our email list and forward out to the associations things that are useful, or you think would be useful. I find that for the two local associations that I work most heavily with here, most of them just don't, they just don't pay attention at the national level, and things that are applicable at the local level being forwarded on is really valuable to my peers here. So I'd say, find some of those national networks that send stuff out that are either actionable or might be useful or whatever. And yeah, the National Corporation for Service, Alive, and Betsy, of course, Betsy. And if you're in the region, or you think, or you have a strong state association like MAVA nearby, join them, or get on their email list also.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any other questions that we can answer? We'll begin our wrap up, but don't leave yet, because two things while I wait for any questions to come in. I wanted to just let you know that we did put the handouts in there, and I'm wondering if I need to send those to folks. No, I don't think so. Close that down. They should be available. If you go into handouts, you should be able to access those yourself. But you will be getting a survey tomorrow and more information. And if you don't see that handout, I'm happy to send that to you. So I'll just talk briefly about a couple of quick announcements. And we've been doing questions as we go. Is that, yes, Alive does do a national conference, but it is a little different in that you gather a group locally, and then we live stream the presenters to you. And this year's theme is leading the way, not managing the day. It's all about developing leadership within yourself, within your volunteers, and how do you get there. And I think in a perfect world, I think many of us in our profession realize if only everybody got what I did, that would be great. And one of the ways to do that is to encourage our peers now, if they wanted to increase their professional development and perhaps move on to that role of executive director. Wouldn't that be great if your boss used to be someone who led volunteers and programs, and they would get what you do, and that's another way to help develop the profession, I think. But there's an informational webinar this Thursday registration is now open for sites, and you can find out more information about that at our website or at betterimpact.org. You can also email to me directly for specific information, but we're really excited about this year's presenters, including Angela Williamson, Heidi Jacob, and Beth Steinhorn, and it will be facilitated by Dana Litwin, who in her spare time is also a stand-up comic and improv comedy performer. So it'll be entertaining and informative. We also are looking at board recruitment for Alive in August, and it's a great professional development opportunity, great way to make an impact nationally. And I will say it's a great group of folks to work with who are really passionate about supporting and furthering advocacy for the profession. And you can always check our homepage and calendar for more information. There will be a newsletter coming out for members soon. But if you have any general questions, I will put this, let's see, I don't see. So Casey has a question. How do you know if your state area is planning to host the Alive conference? Casey, as soon as we get folks confirming, and that should be probably by the end of the month, we'll have a list of those. I can tell you right now in the United States, we have a group in Dallas. We have a group in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in Boston, Massachusetts, in Delaware. Oh, golly, now I can't remember where in Delaware, but we do have one there. And I know folks are going to be signing on soon from Kansas. We're looking at a couple of sites in California that we hope will be signing on, as well as Michigan and Florida. So, and this is an international event. We partner with Volunteer Management Professionals of Canada. So you'll get a chance to network virtually also with your peers to the north. And I think that's always been interesting and also a little affirming, because no matter who you talk to from anywhere, we're all facing many of those same challenges. But you can always check our homepage and calendar for more information. If you've got any other questions, you can also just contact me directly at manager@volunteeralive.org, and I'm going to put that in the chat box or the question box and send that to everybody. And great questions. And I will start to wrap up. And again, I'd like to individually thank Garrett, Jason, and Betsy for their input and for their insight. But I especially want to thank each of you for the work that you're doing in your own communities to support your volunteers and provide wonderful supports in your community. And just a sincere thank you for the work that you do. And you are appreciated. And I appreciate that you're here today to invest a little bit of time in your own professional development. And we're happy to present this to our members as one of the ways to keep connected. If there are no other questions, I'm just hearing thank you. And again, you're welcome. That's what we're here for. And thank you to everyone. And with that, we'll end the webinar. Tomorrow you will get a quick survey and opportunity for feedback. If you don't have a chance to access those handouts, I can email those to you separately as well. And want to thank everybody and have a great rest of your day. Looking at the national weather map, I think it's safe to say stay cool. Bye-bye.